think that's our cue, right? Are we good to go? Excellent. So thank you everybody for joining us in what is destined to be a fantastic panel. We've got a wide array of experts on the region, but not just the region. To my left, I have Mr. George Kremlis, who was the principal advisor to the Greek Prime Minister on energy, environment, the circular economy, and other things, amongst those, and climate. And also an honorary director of the European Commission, right? To Mr. Kremlis' left, we have His Excellency, the US Ambassador to Cyprus. Then we have the British High Commissioner to Cyprus. The High Commissioner's left, we have the MD for Europe of the European Diplomatic Corps, the European External Action Service. And then to the left, we have an Associate Fellow of Chatham House, Dimitrios Cavouras, who is also an expert on the East Med. So it's, we're going to have some critical thinking and academic instead as well to reflect the political remarks, just throwing it out there. So if you'll allow me a brief introduction before we get underway. This topic pertains to a project I'm personally interested in, and to a large extent draws from the US understanding of the region, which is why I'm delighted to have the US ambassador as well here. And that relates to, as we heard on the screen, to the security dimension, but also how that's interconnected to broader European security. And in one sentence, I can say it's about the impact of developments in the Eastern Med, or the lack thereof, on broader European security, either directly or indirectly. Now we're a bit short on time, so I'd like to just spell out the rules a bit for our panelists to make sure we have an orderly discussion, and also that we stick. That we stick. I'm happy. I'm happy somebody laughed. You know, positive developments. You know. No, I'm not going to. I promise I'm not going to silence anyone. But just to have kind of a roadmap, there'll be brief introductory remarks starting from the British High Commissioner, 5 to 7 minutes, if we can achieve that, and then we're going to go into. I'm going to try to ask a follow-up question. If we can keep that to 2 minutes. I'm sorry to be restraining you, just being conscious of time. And then we're going to take questions from the audience, and then we'll try to wrap it up within an hour, which is what we've been allocated today. It might be a bit tight, but I'm sure we'll do our best. So with that said, Mr. High Commissioner.
Thank you. Is this working? Hello? Hello? Yeah, now it's working. Okay, good afternoon. Pleasure to be here. Thank you so much to the Cyprus Forum for convening this panel, and to George Hadjipavli for moderating for us. It's a real pleasure to be here. It's always a fascinating forum and event, and I hope today's discussion will be the same. So I'll try to be brief. So since Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine in 2022, the challenges of Euro-Atlantic security have become both clearer and more complex. As a result, we've all spent huge amounts of time thinking about and discussing the impact on regional and global security. And I think there are a number of conclusions we can already begin to draw. So one, Russia's flagrant disregard of international law, the principles of state sovereignty and territorial integrity, have posed a challenge to the rules-based international system. The actions in particular of a veto-wielding UN permanent member of the Security Council has resulted in a loss of confidence across the world in the enforceability of international law and international legal principles. It risks normalizing adventurism and rule-breaking and the logic of might is right. And this has got to be a concern for all of us who believe in the importance of shared values and principles guiding and moderating international behavior. And it's obviously even more important for smaller states like Cyprus. The consequences of this weakening of confidence in the international community's ability to enforce international law are already being seen in other theaters. Azerbaijan's military campaign to take control of Nagorno-Karabakh, the nature and scale of Israel's assaults on both Gaza and now Lebanon, and the Iranian-backed Houthi group's indiscriminate attacks on commercial shipping can all be linked to this changing context and increases the risks and threats that we all now face as the world becomes a more dangerous place. To the increased global economic insecurity has had clear economic impacts as well on all of us. The premium we have all paid as global consumers in higher prices due to higher inflation and the impacts on supply chains, commodity prices, and energy shocks have been painfully clear to all of us. And they're already impacting domestic politics and elections across the world through the rise of populism and the growth of protectionism, neither of which are really solutions to these problems. Surprisingly, the economic impact of this increased instability is essential to weighing up the overall benefits and risks of any policy responses. 3, the dramatic impact on energy markets has been particularly clear given Russia's importance to the global oil and gas sectors. And although this has led to some short-term pain for European citizens, the longer-term impact is already clearly positive. The move away from reliance on Russian gas and oil and the boost this has given to drives for alternative renewable sources of energy are hugely beneficial both to European energy security and our efforts to tackle the climate crisis. Now, in all these areas, the strategic significance of the Eastern Mediterranean is clear. Linking 3 continents and directly impacted by the Ukraine and Levant conflicts, as well as the energy and cost of living crises, the region has an important role to play in the global response. And again, I'll try to draw a few observations around this. Firstly, one unexpected side effect of Russia's horrific war in Ukraine has been the clarity it has helped create for some countries, like Cyprus, who had in the past sought to balance their relations between Russia and the West. It's now clear to everybody that there can be no such viable balancing for any EU state, and Cyprus's choice of an unequivocal Western strategic orientation is very welcome. Secondly, it's made clear that greater international cooperation and solidarity in our collective efforts to strengthen established international norms and values is vital. Cyprus's support to regional evacuations of civilians caught up in conflicts, as well as its initiative to drive a Gaza humanitarian maritime corridor, are good examples of just this sort of much-needed cooperation. Thirdly, the importance of energy interconnectivity has become much clearer. The UK, like Cyprus, is an island nation, but despite the challenges of our geography, we realized early the importance of energy interconnectivity, and the UK is now interconnected with 5 of our neighboring countries via seabed cables, boosting our energy security and resilience. Efforts are already underway to increase energy interconnectivity in the Eastern Mediterranean. But the reality is that the projects being proposed are more complicated and costly because of political challenges that remain unresolved in the region. And I hope the increasing clarity of the costs of political instability and insecurity can help with a renewed and more creative push to resolve regional problems such as the Cyprus problem. Finally, the importance of increased cooperation in our security and military policies in Europe remains essential. The new UK government has reaffirmed its commitment to NATO and set the goal of reaching a new security agreement with the EU. In addition, we are all having to reconsider our military industrial capacity and our overall spend on defense. And the more we can adopt a harmonized and coherent approach to our security and military policies in the Euro-Atlantic area, the more able we will be to effectively defend our interests, our values, and our citizens. Thank you very much, and I look forward to the debate that follows.
Thank you very much, High Commissioner. Not only was that fascinating, but it was also right on time. So thank you for that. Shall we go to the Ambassador of the United States, Ambassador Fisher? The floor is yours.
Okay. Working? Yes. Super. Listen, thanks very much. It's great to be back at the Cyprus Forum and to be on a fantastic panel. I will tell you, George, that I took note of like your scene setter question, which I'm pretty sure encompassed, I don't know, about 20 different issue sets from migration to energy to political military affairs. So I took that as a license to let's just, really think about the big picture of what's going on, and we can drill down specifically as you'd like. Look, in addition to a lot of what the High Commissioner has said in terms of recognizing where we are post-February of 2022, really I think for the United States, what has become increasingly clear is that, there is just an incredibly fierce competition that is underway to define a new age in international affairs. And this is something that Secretary Blinken has just put forward an article about, and I really would urge everyone to take a look at this because I think it really sums up for the United States how it is we are looking at this age of fierce competition. In many ways, Russia is at the forefront of it, but it is very much aligned with Iran, the DPRK, and with the People's Republic of China. And this is a group of countries that we see are determined to undermine those foundational principles of the international system. They are autocratic at home, and they are seeking spheres of influence abroad. They want to weaponize economics, they want to weaponize energy, and they want to create dependencies in these areas. And so, what is our answer? Well, in many ways, our answer is that we have to outcompete, and we must, we are driven in every possible way to revitalize our partnerships and our alliances, because this is the only way that we will be able to counter these countries. This is the only way we are going to be effective in defending those foundational principles of the international system. So look, our goals in this, it's important to put forward the affirmative, I believe, right? And what is it that we seek right now? Well, we are very much looking for countries to be able to choose their own futures. We are looking for fair competition. We are looking for tech that empowers people and accelerates human progress. And fundamentally, we want to ensure that international law is respected, including the UN Charter. So, what do we see at this point following Russia's re-invasion of Ukraine in 2022? What do we see at this point now, more than 2.5 years into this inhumane and unjust war? What we see is a Russia that is increasingly dependent on these fellow revisionist countries. I think specifically right now, given where we are, focusing on Iran and the drones that they are providing, the ballistic missiles they are providing to this fight, right? It takes us to one of the points that you raised about the question of sort of expanding the thinking about 3 Cs into thinking more about 5 Cs, right? Europe's security, transatlantic security, very much tied to events that are taking place in the Red Sea, attacks against commercial shipping, the ability of Iran and its proxies to reach targets in Europe, in the Mediterranean, truly what has happened to the shipping industry in the Red Sea, and the many nations, including those on this panel, that are represented that are actively working to counter those threats. We have to do more to enable our ability to operate together, to coordinate across all of the elements of our national power that we have. It is absolutely essential at this point. I think, one of the questions, George, that you asked was about diverting attention, right? Is what's happening in the Middle East diverting attention from the fight in Ukraine? And from my perspective, from the United States perspective, we don't have that luxury. We cannot allow our attention to be diverted, right? We have to be able to focus on the fight in Ukraine, in supporting Israel's right to defend its state and its citizens, at the same time seeking that fair and just solution for the Palestinians. We have to, at the same time, stay focused on developments in Asia. We have to acknowledge the crisis that continues to develop in Africa, particularly in Sudan, because these revisionist states are actively fueling both sides of the fight in Sudan. And so there is no luxury of saying we will only focus on one of these challenges. We as the West, we as the transatlantic community, we have to be able to assert our positive vision for the world, because if we don't, again, it's the revisionists that are going to assert that it is autocracy that works best, and that they will be looking to advance those spheres of influence. So we have to redouble our efforts, and there's no better way than to do that than by having conversations like this, by ensuring that our institutions are able to work together to maximal effect. European institutions, transatlantic institutions, we have to do more to reduce the barriers to that cooperation. And I'll just leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Fantastic remarks. Thank you very much for that. And yes, indeed, the idea behind the prompt was to look at the big picture. So thanks for doing that, offering the US perspective on the big picture for us. Shall we move to our special guest all the way from Brussels, Ms. Eichhorst, MD for the EEAS. Next. The floor is yours.
Thank you, George. Thanks to everybody. Great to be on this panel. You make sound Brussels so far away, while, you know, this is the European Union. We're right here. I couldn't agree more with what is said by the High Commissioner, by the Ambassador. So I'm not going to repeat, if you like, the bigger strategic security picture. I want to start more personal. First, I'm really happy to be on the forum. It's my first time. It's probably also my last time. But I have been working for many years on what we call in our department the East Med department and East Med issues back in Brussels. High Representative Borrell was charged actually by all member states to come up with, if some of you remember, an East Mediterranean conference a few years ago. And we really tried very hard to get the conversation going, to get it started and then get it going. Politics comes always in the way, and it didn't work as yet, but on your first point, or on your last point of your session, I would say the strategic significance of the East Med, there is no doubt about it, how important the region is and how increasingly important it is for the European Union. For me personally, it's also important to be here in view of everything that's happening in the region. I want to pause for a second. I mean, bombing is going on, even in the center of Beirut as we speak. Elsewhere in the region, we have seen it. I think we have to be aware constantly, and we are. I mean, diplomats we are, citizens we are. Let's continue to try to talk, meet, work to avoid escalation. I mean, we are all in that work of also increasing, where as much as we can, the voices of reason in a very troubled part of the history. There's so much history. There's so much history here in Cyprus. And I think the most recent history, it's not a good show for many people on the island. That's why we're all here. We try to look forward. We try to look for the future. Lenin said there are decades when nothing happens, and there were weeks when decades happen. And it's true. History is an extremely important context for our policy and for our decision making. But what you do need, when you really want to move forward on solutions, you need to have the mindset that says, I'm going to do it differently. I have the courage to think differently and to work differently. And that goes a little bit on the meta line, as the ambassador was saying, how we are working institutional and international architecture differently. But things have to be done differently. I saw it with my own eyes when I was an intern at the United Nations Secretariat a long time ago. And we picked up signs that Frederick de Klerk, he decided to want to be on the right side of history. That was something happening at the time. I did not see it in Somalia, where I worked, also for the UN. I didn't see it in the Middle East, only until Yitzhak Rabin decided to sign with Yasser Arafat at the time, and also later on with King Hussein of Jordan. The price of courage to pay in politics, it's very high, sometimes really, really high. But the absence of courage is also having a very high price. And we see that constantly here in the Middle East, not here, sorry, but in the East Med, but in the Middle East, the muddling through goes on after year and year and year. Escalation after escalation until actually 7th of October last year. And that changed everything. On the continent, I worked for many years for High Representative Mogherini to get the two leaders from Serbia and Kosovo to agree on a legally binding agreement. To no avail, but at least nobody got killed at the time. On the Cyprus issue, High Representative Mogherini and High Representative Borrell, they were fully engaged. But there were many factors that could not bring the parties together. I do hope that the conversation now planned for 15th of October can start a process, because we need those processes to start and to work. But I did live courage, and much later it was, and also professionally, when I worked alongside High Representative Mogherini, when we supported 2 leaders in Greece and in North Macedonia to agree on the Prespa agreement, also with the UN work done there under the auspices. So what leaders do, they have to try to learn how to trust each other. Nelson Mandela once wisely said, the only way you can tell whether you can trust someone is to trust them. And as diplomats, we have that responsibility to try one more time, to have one more meeting, to be open, to give the benefit of the doubt to a moment, to a discussion. And that is actually taking me to the point of the negotiations. You will discuss it tomorrow at the forum. I very much look forward to those panels as well, where empathy needs to kick in. Empathy is not a basis for foreign policy, as yet. It's not, because it could be perceived as too emotional, but empathy is extremely important to understand where the other comes from and what is the other actually trying to say to you in terms of where they want to end up. Sorry for being a bit philosophical at the beginning, but I still want to make 3 quick points on interconnectedness. But everything I said is about interconnectivity in any case. So the first point on the uncertainty and the unpredictability, as it was said, we focus very much in Brussels with all of you on functioning institutions, functioning states, functioning apparatus, where you see that decisions can be made in country, and also be implemented, but also more in the region. We will soon have in Brussels a new college, as we call it, a new commission in place. Leaders already decided there will be a new president of the council, Antonio Costa. There will be the new high representative, Kaja Kallas. So it's a setup where you know very well the president of the commission, von der Leyen, and the president of the parliament, Metsola. A new setup of all of those individuals want to do exactly what you were both pointing at making sure that in an inclusive way we find the right solution, and definitely work, and I told the ambassador before, on a strong transatlantic, Euro-transatlantic relationship, which, as the ambassador knows, it's very strong, European Union and US these days, regardless of who wins what election. My second point is that today the key topics of our political leaders are really, it is of course this, but it's very much about migration, it's about security, defense, curbing the energy prices, the independence of the energy, security. Yesterday evening, Mario Nava, he's not here, but he spoke about the 2 key reports that came out in Brussels. You know them. President of Cyprus mentioned it this morning, Draghi and Letta. There's a lot around competitiveness that needs to be cleared and needs to be worked on. It's a very big item on the region and on the European Council. And it's important for here, it's important for Cyprus, it's important for the whole East Med. If we look at the MENA region, as it is, it's one of the least integrated regions in the world. And I'm saying a sentence I said 30 years ago as well. Let's face it. Intra-regional trade is only accounting for about 8% of both exports and imports. And these economies, you need to open up. It's happening in the Gulf. Quite with a lot of speed, and we are all tying into that, but it has to happen further. There will be a new commissioner for the Mediterranean, and in her new mandate she will also invest on partnerships, economy, job, everything that was mentioned before. And in it also we will definitely go high speed on defense. I know many of you in the room know this, but it's a top priority also with our partners in the United Kingdom. So my third and last point is really the importance of the Eastern Mediterranean itself. I mentioned it already. we did not kick off enough in the European Union to have a mapping out of the interest and the convergences and turning conflict into real cooperation. But I can see with the new setup, this is surely on very high on our agenda, mainly because we need diversified, resilient supply chains. We need the global gateway, and watch that space of global gateway. It's extremely important for the European Union. Happy to come back in the discussion, but we need to take that to the next level of really proposing really sustainable projects and programs under that lot, and then have those very long-term mutually beneficial partnerships. Global gateway, important. I will not dwell on it now. I'm happy to discuss it later. But we have so much on our plate and our agenda, a lot of energy, a lot of also belief that we can actually get out of the situation where we are now as long as we work together and get the work going. Thank you.
For finishing on that very positive note. Hello, yeah. Thank you for finishing on that positive note, and thank you for raising the point on the limited interconnectedness of the region, like intra-region connections. I think that's something that we're going to definitely touch upon in the Q&A. Shall we come back to this side of the room before doing a zigzag to the other side, and then take the questions?
Well, thank you, George, and thank you for organizing this exciting panel with such a broad spectrum of themes. Although we are not under Chatham House rules, I will try to share with you some personal views on key topics that are covered by the theme, starting with a positive prospect, which is to have the 3 Cs becoming 5 Cs, which means that we need Cyprus in the 5 Cs initiatives. We are already 4 with Greece, although the historic name of the 3 Cs is already there, and hopefully we should all work together to ensure that Cyprus, as a member state of the European Union, but also as a key player in the region, and we have noticed the important role of Cyprus geopolitically and geostrategically in the current crisis, to be part of the 5 Cs family, which is a family to promote energy, transport, interconnectivity, and digital economy. And these are priorities of the European Union under the Green Deal, the energy transition, and the digital transition. So this is the first message from me. The second message, as there is a Euro-Atlantic reference, is what will happen in the future between NATO on the one hand and the defense pillar of the European Union, which is currently developing with a defense industry, including anti-missile, Iron Dome, and Arrow systems, which are to be developed by the EU to protect itself, and how this complementarity will develop, depending also on the outcome of the US elections. We, on the European side, we know more or less where we are and where we go, but still a new commission will be in place, and we will have a defense commissioner, which is a new portfolio to be developed. So this is the second point, and in that respect, defense is extremely important. We have a fund for that, and we need also to see how Cyprus could be protected, because there have been some threats directed towards Cyprus, which is in the hot region currently. Now, another consideration. I believe that we need to review the law of the war, or the law of armed conflicts, because it is old-fashioned, it is humanitarian mainly, but now with the climate crisis, you should all know that a war destroys all the efforts of the Green Deal, all the efforts that the international community is doing under the Paris Agreement. Soon we will go to COP29 to Baku to try to convince the international community that we need to stop the emissions to become climate neutral by 2050. I hope we will. But doing so with wars which lead to emissions not only of CO2 and methane, but also of emissions of dangerous gases, becomes a mission impossible. Therefore, it is very important to define, let's say, the law of war, taking into consideration the climate crisis, but also taking into consideration the nuclear issue. Zaporizhia, the largest nuclear power plant in Ukraine, was threatened several times, and you can imagine what can happen. On the other hand, I express my personal concerns against the development of the nuclear program of Iran, which is worrying if you see how this country behaves without making any additional comment, as there might be a contradiction between what I'm saying and what I might suggest. Now, energy region. Cyprus can become an energy hub. We have now the cable agreed. It will connect Cyprus to Crete and to the European Union. Extremely important, a two-way cable to feed Cyprus, but also, if more electricity is produced in the region, to provide electricity to the European Union. The project covers the connection between Cyprus and Israel, extremely important as well, as we can provide energy to Israel, but we can also get clean energy in the future from Israel. And there are other ideas as well to connect through a cable Saudi Arabia, but this is an early, premature project. But the cables in the region are extremely important, and of course, cables imply stability in the region, a spirit of cooperation, of trust, and also an understanding on the exclusive economic zones, because under the law of the sea and international law, the exclusive economic zone of Cyprus is connected with the exclusive economic zone of Greece, and the memorandum of Turkey and Libya is completely illegal, and this memorandum cuts the exclusive and the connection between the two economic zones, which is extremely important. Now, the cable is not affected by the exclusive economic zone, but the East Med pipeline could be affected, because there is a distinction between the cables and the pipelines. For the pipelines, the country which claims that the pipeline crosses its exclusive economic zone needs to be consulted. And in that respect, the country which will ask to be consulted is now knocking on the door of BRICS. The ambassador has referred to this international context of competition with other big competitors, and BRICS currently is the most threatening, I would say, competitor, and in that respect, this is something that the European Union should consider carefully, as well as NATO, as a member state, a potential member state, and a NATO member with BRICS doesn't make a lot of sense. Another concern with what is happening in the region is migration. We already have climate migration. We will have a new form of migration which can lead to asylum requests. This is another concern. The European Union is looking into this. But again, this is an additional consideration that needs to be kept in mind. And last but not least, we are in Cyprus, and as a former official of the European Commission, having spent most of my career there, it's a European state, a European member state. I do believe that the European Union, in addition to the strong declarations that have been made by our president, by the president of the European Parliament, needs also to have a stronger grip on this issue, and to have a more active role to find a resolution of the Cypriot issue, which will lead to a single state, member of the European Union, with benefits for both communities, by zonal, by community state, This is the best solution. We all know this, and we need to work towards this direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kremlis, and I love the detail as well as the big picture, and I'm really also delighted that you like the 5Cs name. We came up with it in a very rainy night in Oxford, so it's good that it's now paying off. Last but definitely not least, our expert from Chatham House, Dimi Cavouras.
Thank you, George. I would like to highlight on a word, we all have it in the back of our minds, which is peace. I mean, the energy cooperation can bring a sort of a sustainable peace, but before that we have to define what is peace, if it's the absence of war, if it's a comfortable ceasefire, if it's a convenient status quo, it's a cold peace. I mean, for all the parties. I mean, this morning, the President of the Republic, he said there is no frozen conflicts. And it's true. I mean, we have to see, we're talking about the Eastern Mediterranean. I mean, we have two conflicts, Cyprus conflict and the Middle East conflict, or the Palestinian conflict. It's still there. I mean, the security architecture is obviously failing, but all this half a century, we're trying over and over without a real and long-lasting peace. So the undermining of diplomacy, the multilateral organizations, the undermining of the UN, I mean, the diplomats, you must have a lot of work. And I think you have to be maybe pushing more with your governments in order to have a sort of a more, the decision maker can act more progressively and towards finding solutions for peace. So if we see the Eastern Mediterranean energy landscape, we have a lot of movements and a lot of the last, especially 10 years, a lot of actions and agreements, but actually we don't have any actual result as much as been anticipated initially. So I will quickly analyze a bit with the strengths how, I mean, we had the East Med gas reserves discovery, and then we had this trilateral cooperation between Israel, Cyprus, and Greece, and then it became 3+1 with the US. We had the trilateral cooperation between Egypt, Cyprus, and Greece. We had the creation of East Med Gas Forum, which we had Israel and Palestine members, and we could see a sort of, and we can see a sort of positive sort of outcome, a forum that the countries can discuss on further energy cooperation. We see the projects of the electricity interconnectors, like the GREGI or the Great Sea Interconnector. And of course, we see a lot of potential cooperation in the renewable sources of energy. There are nevertheless weaknesses, which are the frozen, or let us say chronic conflicts that I just referred about, Palestine and Cyprus. We have other regional conflicts. We don't have to forget the overall landscape, geopolitical landscape of in Ukraine, in Syria, in Libya, in Sudan, in Yemen. It's all a ticking situation that it's very dangerous and can escalate. Of course, another weakness is that these huge energy projects, they need huge capital for investments. They need a high cost of maintenance as well. There's a lot of lack of infrastructure. There's, of course, politically claims and agreements on the exclusive economic zones that are conflicting between the countries in the region. Of course, there are opportunities as well, like all this EU independency from the Russian gas and the diversification of resources from different markets. the energy mix necessity for the climate, but we also have the US and the EU political support. We have the EU PCI and PMI lists that a lot of projects in the East Med are there, and we have also exclusive economic zone agreements between, for example, Egypt and Cyprus, between Greece and Italy, or Greece partially with Egypt, and I will dare to say between also Lebanon and Israel, funny enough these days. Of course, we have the energy cooperation for peace and stability, that the energy can be a tool for peace. And of course, we have the opportunity of cooperating on green hydrogen threats. Threats, of course, we have the chronic conflicts escalation, like the one we are experiencing these days. The expansion, of course, of the Gaza war, the exclusive economic zone disputes, and the economies of crisis, of course. Also, in terms of specifically gas reserves, we have limited resources in Eastern Mediterranean. That's why also the project of East Med pipeline is not being realized. And lastly, I would like to say how can we have a successful project realization. Of course, we need, first of all, political will from the parties involved. We need the investment to be profitable. It needs high capital, but it needs also to have a cost-benefit, proper cost-benefit analysis. And of course, the geopolitical landscape. All this, if we can imagine them as stars, they need to align in order to have a successful project that can contribute to peace in the Eastern Mediterranean. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dimi, and thank you for bringing up two very important themes, energy and peace, and the complexities these entail, but also perhaps interconnectedness between the two. If the audience will allow me, I would like to ask, use my prerogatives as a moderator and ask a question to the panel, if you'll entertain me. And I'd like to use an example that came up in my discussion with the High Commissioner yesterday over dinner, and that goes back to the speech that 10 years ago, the then Vice President of the United States, now President Biden, gave in a not far away from here, actually, neighboring Turkey. And long speech, but two key points, according to me, Ambassador, please correct me. The first one was Europe is vulnerable because of its energy dependency on we know where. And secondly, the East Med is a viable alternative to alleviate at least part of that dependency. I understand this became codified in US law, 2019, the East Med Security and Partnership, Security and Energy Partnership Act. But fast forward to 2022, this happened. What Joe Biden described back then happened. You know, we had some experts, a CEO of a German energy company said that now Germany is permanently damaged from the energy-driven inflationary crisis. A beef burger in London Bridge, High Commissioner, is now almost £19. That's New York prices. No offense, Ambassador, you know. So the question I'd like to ask is, what are the lessons we have taken from this whole conundrum upon reflection about the interconnectedness of what happens or what doesn't happen in the East Med with what happens in the rest of Europe? Who would like to go first? I leave it up to you. Yes, please, Ambassador.
I'm happy to jump in. Look, what President Biden forecasted, right, isn't something that we hope, right? The United States spent decades investing in Russia's promise and in bringing Russia into institutions, bringing Russia in as a reliable partner that we hoped they could be. And so when you talk about energy dependence, I do think you should say the R word. You don't have to say you know that it was dependence on Russia, right? And it is dependence on Russia. And so, the Eastern Med can be, just as President Biden foresaw, just as the East Med Security and Partnership Act envisioned, this region can contribute to Europe's energy security, which is contributing to the world's energy security, right? the political courage that is required to overcome the barriers is really an important point, right? And so we are seeing some of these small steps recently. We're making progress, I think, in this region to seeing the Eastern Mediterranean be the energy contributor, being a region that is helping to solve problems and address problems, but we need more, right? We need more if we are all going to be able to work together to combat the threats that we face. And so I will make a point which I have maybe made recently, which is to say, now is the time. Now is the time for political courage. Now is the time to take advantage of opportunities that don't come back. Now is the time to advance energy security, energy stability, because the risks that this region faces, that the world faces, are just too great.
Thank you, Ambassador. Sure.
Yeah, since it's about a few
Absolutely.
a few words which we repeat a lot actually in Brussels and for all Europeans here. European Union, European member states definitely very dependent on energy from Russia, but on natural resources from China, on security from the United States. We say that openly. We have no issue in saying that, but why do we say it? Because actually, just post-Second World War, the key concern for Europe was coal and steel and peace and security, but it was all about food security and make sure that we are totally on ourselves when it comes to food security. All the other areas that should have been addressed, we needed constant wake-up calls. Wake-up calls. Guys, you need to be on your own. And that is happening. I saw that happening since 24th of February, the whole machinery, and it was mentioned before. 24/7 working on, I don't like the word resilience, but it's that independence of when you are on your own, you really have to be able to step up. We want to keep the quality of the life of our citizens. We want to keep that quality standards. We don't want to go into lower standards or to even erode the single market. Why are we so hooked up about the single market? Why is this so important for the European Union? Why don't people understand we cannot start eating from the internal market because then the whole system will fall apart? And what's crucial in there is the rule of law. It's absolutely crucial. And that's what we are also struggling with within. It's a constant trying way to improve. I must say, as a European citizen, I'm very struck by the way we managed so far to overcome all these challenges. Sometimes I feel as a civil servant that we are in a constant crisis mode, internally, externally. But it's true that we find mechanisms to overcome. And we do that with our partners. And there is partnership is so important to try to do that. And I think it goes for all of us and for every nation that we try to be able to stand on our feet and defend the quality of life of our citizens. It's normal.
Maybe just one quick point. So the risk that President Biden articulated at that time was about the dependence. But that risk came to bear, and actually Europe has found a way around that without the solution that he suggested, which was bringing the Eastern Mediterranean, because the political challenges and obstacles in this region haven't been resolved. And so I think the lesson to take from that is this region risks being left behind unless it can resolve its political challenges and be part of that solution and part of the global integration, which we all need. But that is a risk that is quite real.
Thank you for the comment, Commissioner. Mr. Kremlis, would you like to...
Let me say that the energy needs in the region are increasing exponentially. The population in Egypt increases by 1 million every year. President Sisi has very ambitious plans with New Cairo. They need a lot of gas. And what the gas pipeline is met was, when we started discussing it several years ago, was a bankable, viable, and technically feasible project. Nowadays, under the current circumstances, there are doubts about it because the first client needing energy desperately is Egypt. And here there is a contradiction because the EU has supported the cable Israel-Cyprus treaty as a PCI, supported financially, politically, etc. There is another project, the GREGI, to connect Egypt through an undersea cable with Greece. Very important. It is not still a PMI. It is not still a PMI, but that means that Egypt will be able to produce green electricity, which will be through this cable transported to the European Union. And here there is a contradiction because Egypt needs desperately energy. Therefore, what is important, and in that respect, the cooperation of all our countries in the region and the role of the United States is extremely important to support all those projects which are complementary to each other. In other words, we needed to invest in Egypt. They need investments on solar, on wind, on storage, hybrid projects, which will produce electricity. They will serve themselves first, as they need this electricity, and the remainder can go through the cable to Greece, and therefore there are issues of bankability of the project. Therefore, what is important is to have a holistic view of all the energy projects in the region and not a piecemeal approach. This is a good project, this is a good project. We need to see the broad picture to know where we are, and of course, all the wars that have happened in the last decades were energy wars. Hopefully, we will not have wars for the water, because now with desalination, which needs renewable energy, still the energy is there. But again, this is a big challenge, and this is where the European Union needs to have a very strong role, not only DG Energy, but strategically, and the United States need also to have a very strong say and to be very supportive in this process. I still believe that there are gas resources in the region which could support the ISCMED. But again, one needs to see how the cards will be distributed.
Absolutely, excellent points. And it's important to note as well that Israel is exporting to Egypt, and now they're intending to double down on production if that link remains,
and
right?
Israel will need more energy in the future.
As well. And it's also important to note, going back to the High Commissioner, you're very right. It's important, we're talking about the US and the UK and the EU, but it's important for the region to take ownership of its affairs. But at the same time, High Commissioner, I'd like to push back against the idea that we have found a solution. Officially, in official numbers, the EU is right now importing 16% of its natural gas demand through Russia.
I said that the initial dependence, that was the risk, that's been dealt with. And the broader risk is actually that other solutions will be found that will not include this region. And I think the sort of the green transition and the green revolution, every bit contributes, and we need the greater resilience. But this isn't, let's be frank, this isn't the most important part of the jigsaw. And I think there's sometimes a slight overinflating of the importance. This can play a hugely important role, but if the political obstacles, if the risk factors, if the geopolitical obstacles aren't resolved, it won't be part of the solution.
I take that point. Dimi, shall we go? We just have one last speaker, and then we're going to come in for questions. Really quickly, if you can, Dimi, apologies for the time constraints.
Sure. Just to analyze, I mean, there was a lot of discussions here in Cyprus concerning the Great Sea Interconnector. I mean, we had the political will from the governments of Greece, of Cyprus, and from Israel. But Cyprus raised the issue of the viability and who is going to pay for this project, because it's really costly. But there was the issue is solved, but still, and also another element was the geopolitical risk. So the geopolitical risk, I mean, as soon as we have wars in the region, as soon as we don't have peace, any project is really vulnerable. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have time for, I see 3 hands that have lobbied me effectively. Three questions, and then fourth, if we have time, the lady in the green first, the gentleman in the white T-shirt, and the lady in red. If we can ask the questions very promptly, because we're running out of time, and if I can ask the speakers, please, to also respond simply. They do, right? So I'm going to give you my microphone.
Thank you very much. I will be quick. My name is Marina Nafidou, Professor of Environmental Engineering in the University of Cyprus. I can't escape to note that the entire discussion on the green energy transition is dominated by a narrative of geopolitical antagonism rather than a peace project, a project of strengthening and deepening peace, especially on the island. So I would like, and reminding ourselves that European Union was initially a peace project after the World War. I find it impossible that this green transition will progress without any peace deepening process on the island. So it's important to dedicate the appropriate importance and effort and energy in the island. So my question is, what are the instruments that European Union can give us, including universities' research in promoting environmental collaboration, so that we avoid seeing any phenomena like a couple of years ago when there was an oil spill from Lebanon reaching the east coast of Cyprus, and environmental scientists from either sides of the Green Line were sitting and hoping not to reach either side of the island. So how can we use another doctrine of necessity, the necessity of climate change adaptation on the island, so that we can cultivate the peace process? Thank you.
Yes, hello. My name is Uffe Hvidkjær. I'm from Denmark and chair of a citizen think tank called Europe Dialogue. So talking about Mediterranean agenda in general, I want to highlight two topics and ask what you think of that. First, we are in Cyprus. Cyprus has the EU presidency in 2026, and it starts nearly very soon because they are in the trio with Poland and Denmark, where I am from. So what can the Cyprus EU presidency mean? And the new EU Commission, I know they are still in process, but a Mediterranean commissioner could be one of the 27. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Ksenia Mohortova, Community of Ukrainian Cypriot Friendship. I have a question regarding, isn't it time to have a sincere talk to the European nations? You cannot maintain the same level of life and have a fire in your backyard or even in one of your rooms. You cannot have a family dinner having a fire in one of your rooms. Maybe it's time to talk about the real danger of Russia overcoming Ukraine and coming further. Because what I see now is that it's someone else's war, someone else should fight for it, and we should maintain our level of life. Thank you.
We'll take one more question very, very quickly. You promise, please, to be very, very quick.
Yeah, thank you very much. Dimitrios Hadjipavli from Cyprus MOD. Just a small comment and then a question about the security and interconnectedness. Of course, we take into consideration what is happening in our backyard. More than 100 billions were given to Ukraine from Europe, and and we continue to do this for the Mediterranean and for the EU. I'm visiting Brussels regularly. I was living in Brussels, working in the external service. However, nowadays, there is no real action according to what is happening in the Eastern Mediterranean Near East. What is the position? And we are focusing exactly, we are speaking only for Ukraine. So what is the position of the external service on this?
Go from Dimi this way, please, if we can, in 1 or 2 minutes. I know they're very pressing.
We've given hundreds of thousands of lives, but you were given millions.
Yes, Dimi, please.
I mean, we need, on the issue of peace and energy, I mean, it's a very tricky, I mean, in other parts of the world been used, but the thing is the political will. Is there any political will to really solve the problems and really have a sustainable peace? Because we can push for agreements, but in real life, we must have cooperation, we have to have exchange, we have to have... From bottom up, exactly. Bottom up, not, and both sides, I will say. Both, they need to work for that.
Thank you. Eichhorst.
All points are very valuable and they need much more than just 1 minute from us. But I want to start with your point, if you don't mind, on I so agree with you that on all the work we are doing, we have to keep in mind, and I can tell you in Brussels, it is very much the line, we are at war. We are under threat, totally. The whole of the European Union. And I don't think it trickles down a lot, because a lot of people have a lot of issues everywhere where they are. But it is essential. It is an essential part. And I can tell you every meeting, everything we do in Brussels, it's around that. Now there's the second war zone, right here where we are around. Constant discussions, constantly. We don't stop. Again, you know, every European Council, you know how it is in politics that not everything is visible that is being done. I'm not looking for excuses here, but I can tell you of working so close to the leadership how much the machine is running to try to stop the escalation and to try to really come to a final solution, because of course we cannot go on like this. I fully agree with you. And that will be in the hands of also the presidency of Cyprus. I'm coming to that in next time, but first Denmark. I think there are high expectations on the presidency of Cyprus when they take it later on, first Poland, Denmark. You know, they work very hard on the programs there, on the priorities. And perhaps I can then just link it to the first comment on, you know, peace and environment, and try to be really, because we got the kick in the European Union before 24th of February on the green transition. That's where we really started, green, digital, industrialization, before the war started. And it is exactly, I think this is maybe a conclusion from this panel, that we have to continue to be on that line. It's very hard to do at wartime, but that is exactly where we need to go bottom up. I thank you for your peace dividend on the environment. I will take it back, and I believe it's very important.
Time is up, I think, and I don't have much to add. We absolutely feel your pain, and in the UK at least, we absolutely see that the fight that Ukraine is fighting is our fight, even if it is your people who are making the sacrifice. And on the point about the peace dividend, couldn't agree more, but that requires political will, which currently isn't in place.
I think that's how you know time is up, is when the batteries die. Look, I think from our perspective, right, everything that we are doing to address, I'm going to just try to take some of these threads and weave them together to say, you know, the United States is deeply committed to de-escalating the tensions in this region, to using all of the tools that we have to ensure the success of the green transition, to ensure that the Kremlin's war in Ukraine is a strategic failure, to ensure the continuity, the growth, the importance, the fundamental importance of the partnership that we have with the European Union, with the United Kingdom, with our like-minded partners, to ensure that it is not autocracy that wins. And so for the United States part, we're going to keep using the tools that we have, diplomacy, the work we do together in partnership in promoting energy security, to try to develop options to bring peace to the Middle East. We will keep at this, and we will keep it doing this together.
Yes, thank you. I do believe that if we are, and I believe we need to launch an intergovernmental conference to decide about the new architecture of Europe in the light of the enlargement, one of the key priorities should be an energy union next to a defense union. I will not say more about that. We don't have time. I do believe that we should have had 2 hours. But let me add 2 other points. Clearly, we need EU energy diplomacy, climate diplomacy, and circular economy diplomacy. I do believe that this is a new economic model which will help us to achieve the targets of the Green Deal, etc., etc. Now, the EU has no energy resources. Shale gas has failed. The UK has tried, Poland has tried. We have renewables, we are trying to promote them, but there is an issue of grid and an issue of storage, which we need to develop further and which is extremely important. And now nuclear comes back. And the EU needs now to have a clear position on nuclear. We are now talking about SMR, small modular reactors. Under the Delegated Act of the Taxonomy Regulation, we have given a benediction to gas, although gas had an expiry date. And the war in Ukraine has led us in, let's say, in a confusion situation because Germany is phasing out nuclear. And they have lost Nord Stream. so they are in a really critical situation. This is why the EU needs to see the global picture and needs to support alternative routing and alternative sources of energy which can come from this region. And we are, of course, receiving gas from the United States. But as you have correctly pointed out, George, there is still a lot of gas and oil coming from Russia and the EU through Turkey and through disguised forms of transport. So this is the situation now, and I do believe we will be very happy next year to continue this discussion under better circumstances. But let me say something about the Cypriot presidency. I think the Cypriot presidency, together with Denmark has solved the renewable energy problems. They are using a lot of wind. In Greece, we have ilots, and we are not developing solar and wind on our ilots, which would have been a solution. Denmark is building ilots to develop wind. So for Cyprus, the key priority should be insularity. It is the most isolated member state of the European Union. It's not part of the integral market, the single European market, and it has all the handicaps of the insularity. So this is something on which, and the cable is not a solution. There are other solutions on state aid rules, on other financial, let's say, instruments to support Cyprus to integrate better in the European single market and to be able also to have the important role that is now having in this region as an air carrier, as we call it in the military jargon, the most prominent air carrier in this region. Thank you. I'm sorry for being long.
No worries at all. That was very insightful remarks. In concluding the session, may I say 2 final things? The first one is this panel was engineered by the East Mediterranean program at the University of Oxford, which is the first, as we like to say, research and policy program to focus on the East Mediterranean within a world-leading university. So I can promise that we will invite you all, and I hope you accept our invitation to come to Oxford and continue this dialogue, this wonderful dialogue. And on that note, may I thank all of the speakers. They're all distinguished individuals. A lot of them have fought very hard, not just for the East Mediterranean, but for other causes with great success. So please join me in giving them a round of applause for their wonderful